All right. Well, welcome everybody, and thanks for showing up. We have a large number of participants, and we're super excited that you're here. We've called this together just to give you a little bit of ground rules. We have a number of people that are going to speak about various components of the publishing process. We have two interactive functions going on Zoom. The first is the chat, and you're welcome to use the chat to say nice things and to interact. And then if you have questions for the panelists, we're going to ask you to put those in the Q&A. It's easier for me to check on the Q&A, whereas the chat kind of flies up. So I'm going to be looking at the Q&A to moderate any questions that you have, and you can just put them on as you think of it, but we're going to get to Q&A components in our schedule, and then I will refer to them and probably put them together and see linkages, and then put them towards particular panelists, although you can designate particular panelists to ask questions to. And then if you just wanted to chat with one another or have some commentary on the side, again, please be civil. Those things can go in the chat if they're not a question. So this is the first time within the webinar that we have both of those running. I'm going to introduce our panelists as they speak. Instead of doing them all now. So our first speaker is the editor-in-chief of Nationalities Papers, Mylonas, who is an associate professor at the Elliott School of International Affairs at GW. Harris will be talking to us generally about the journal and some of the initiatives that he's taken as editor-in-chief, and then we're going to move on to other components of the submissions process. So Harris, you have the virtual floor.
Thank you, Julie. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for tuning in or logging in. So I'm going to speak very broadly about the process because I want this to be more interactive. So we're going to be taking questions, obviously. So I'm going to start with, I'm going to separate my comments by starting with the research itself, which obviously we're not going to do a webinar on how to conduct research here, but I'm going to say a few things about how the research you're doing is an important component of how to get published, obviously, but very briefly. And then I'm going to go into the writing, framing of the papers, and the process of choosing a journal, which is the bulk of what I'm going to talk about. So let me start by first talking about the research. It's really important. I know it sounds probably obvious to most of you, but it's really important to know your work. In other words, to know what you're working on, how to categorize it, how to communicate what you're working on to other people. And if you have a sense that when you talk about your work, other people are not are not quickly getting in touch with your topic or connecting, ask for help. So for example, I usually ask a good exercise that I suggest to graduate students, PhD students of mine, is to put together a Word document where they list all their papers or working papers, start with the title, have the abstract, a bunch of keywords, and then also list beneath the type of journals they think this would be a good fit for. And then also think of a list of potential reviewers for that paper. So that helps you, first of all, get feedback from whoever you're going to submit this to, your advisor or your mentor or your colleague or your friend. But also it helps you or forces you to think of what's the audience for this work. Where does your work fit in terms of the general literature? So that's the first stage, I would say, kind of getting more confident about situating your work. Once that is done, in a way, you've already answered the question of what's your audience by doing this exercise because you've chosen some ideal reviewers. But having this list of reviewers is the first stage. The second stage is also having in mind the editorial board members of a particular journal, if you have already chosen a journal. So that's going to become more important in a second when I talk about how you choose a journal. So when you have already these papers written and you've conducted this exercise, that's a good time to start sending it around to people before you even submit to get some feedback. not just for proofreading or technical aspects of it, but also get some feedback on the framing. Do they think you're right about the fit of this piece of research for that piece of or that particular journal, and so on and so forth. So don't feel bad about, don't feel that you're imposing on people. Everybody had to do that when they were writing their work. So it's your turn to ask for help. Now, more importantly, and the most important part that most people don't think as deeply, I think, about, because they usually just think of, well, what's the best ranked journal, or what journal has the biggest impact factor? That's where I'm going to submit. That's one way of choosing a journal, but I don't think it's always a winning strategy, although you obviously can get really good reviews if it gets reviewed and it doesn't get desk rejected. But I would say, I would suggest another alternative perspective, which doesn't mean it won't end up with a higher ranked journal, but it's to first really carefully read the aims and scope of the journal, the focus of the journal, as it's called sometimes. Look at who publishes there. Take a look at the table of contents of the past few issues. Also look at its impact factor and whether it's widely cited or not. I'm not saying that's not important, but start with what I started with. Make sure that your paper fits the keywords, the content, the approach fits with the aims and scope of description of that journal. So if you go to Nationalities Papers, I'm just gonna post it here. You read the little blurb like this, right? And that blurb, although you think it's probably there just because we had to put something there to introduce the journal, well, it's not just there for that reason. It's there because it wants to give you some hints of what would be more likely desk rejected or not, what we are good at reviewing or not. When we get, it's not that when we get submissions, because we're a multidisciplinary journal, we might get a submission from, you know, a topic that is of interest to us. It's about nationalism, but in a part of the world we don't cover as much. It might take us much longer to find reviewers. So those are the type of things that these blurbs are useful for. The next point is, how do you make the choice, right? You've read blurbs of a variety of journals. You've looked at their impact factors. You've looked at the table of contents. Basically there you again need to, I would say you would need to discuss this, ask your colleagues, ask mentors. There is no one size fits all answer to this, because different people have different professional needs. A publication in Nationalities Papers may be what is needed to get tenure or to get promotion in one place, but not in another, and so on and so forth. We are now we are now in the social science index. When we were not, that was a big issue for people submitting to Nationalities Papers. So there are all of these considerations that are not similarly distributed across all authors. So that decision will have to be more calibrated for your own case. Once you've made that choice by looking at all this information, shopping your work around to friends and colleagues, the next stage is to really carefully read the instructions to the author or to the contributor, for the contributor. That I can't emphasize that enough. Many people submit their work without reading it, and it's obvious, and that can cost you a very quick desk reject or not so quick desk reject. It will basically lead to you losing time. So basically read the instructions. You'll see they're very important information. There's very important information listed there. Before I pass it on to Ned Whalley, who is our managing editor, and he's going to be introduced by Julie in a minute, I'm going to also give you a few ideas of how to familiarize yourself more with this process by sending you, for example, the portal that we have to submit articles. If you want to become more familiar with this process, a great way would be to start with a book review, for example, right? So by beginning with the publication of a book review, you get a sense of the process. You're learning how to correct proofs, how to interact with the production team, how you interact with the managing editor. So it's also forcing you to create a profile on our platform. Each journal has its own platform. So by having a profile on a platform of a journal increases the likelihood you're going to be asked to be a reviewer. You may think that this is more work, but yes, that's a necessary type of work. If you want to be reviewed, people have to review in order to be reviewed as well, right? Because if no one reviewed, we have a hard time as editors. And more importantly, though, we'll give you a sense of the process. You also get to interact with the editorial team, and you get a better sense of how the actual process works for when the time comes for your actual original article, as we call them, Nationalities Papers. So I'm going to pass it to the baton to Julie to introduce Ned, and he's going to talk about more specific advice that starts from when you are ready to submit your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harris. I appreciate all of that. Ned, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself and showing your video. Ned Whalley is the managing editor of Nationalities Papers, and we've asked Ned to speak about kind of the nuts and bolts of submitting the article and the various processes that it would go through. Ned is the managing editor for Nationalities Papers, but Ned, if you could kind of modulate and speak generally about the process of submitting to any journal, because although we want all of them to submit their articles to Nationalities Papers in specific, the overall title of the webinar is how to do it in general. So we don't expect you all to submit your articles to Nationalities Papers, although we really hope you do. Thank you, Ned, very much.
Welcome, everybody. Sure, I'm just going to sort of reiterate, basically when all the articles come in, they come to me first. And we basically make sure that they meet the sort of requirements that articles for our paper should meet. They come to me, and then we send them to our editorial board, and then they go out to reviewers. But when things come in, if they don't meet basic standards, we don't send them on to reviewers. So it's important that when things come in, they're structured in certain ways, they meet certain criteria. So just a bit about that process, the things we look for. And a lot of this is, everything we get that comes in it's usually very interesting. But if we look for, in the structure of it, does it meet the themes and does it meet the standards that the journal has? So first, do they engage with the themes that our journal is about? Like, are they for Nationalities Papers? And as Harris said, each journal will have their focus. And so it's very difficult for us to find reviewers for certain pieces if they're beyond that remit. Ours is quite broad, but we do also receive things that basically we're not able to take. All the articles, the original articles, should feature original data or research or analysis. They either need to make a theoretical or empirical contribution or a new argument or have some kind of methodological innovation. Often that can be, sort of in your writing, the research is original, but it needs to be, sort of framed and presented that way. It needs to be clear, what it's, the data needs to be reported properly. It needs to be clear what its relationship is to sort of the existing literature on the topic. It needs to be clear that you've read it, that it's cited properly. I would refer everyone again, as Harris says, to the instructions for contributors. We write those very carefully. So, and there's actually a manuscript preparation checklist on there, and it's a good idea to go through and very carefully make sure that you have the right information, that it's done the correct way, you've cited your sources, all your citations are there, they're cited correctly. These types of things, we expect that people are going to take the guidelines seriously, and also it just adds to the length of the process if you don't. That if we get something and it's so out of bounds beyond the standards of the journal, we can't take it, or if the research is really good, I mean, we're not sending it back and forth for a very long time to try and get all those errors fixed. So I would, highly recommend that everyone read that very carefully. If you have any questions, I'm available for all of that stuff. Questions about submitting, etc. But it's most of it is laid out pretty clearly there. It's also important to make sure that the paper is clear, that the information is presented in a clear manner. We do have resources available. I mean, so many of our contributions come from all around the world. We do have resources for non-native speakers of English. There's a link to that on the instructions for contributors page that Harris put up. I'm trying to think what else. I would highly recommend that everybody look, as Harris said, at the table of contents and the authors that published, but it would be good to look at papers that we have published. Some of them are open access. Some of them are free on our website. And to make sure that your paper is sort of in line with the way that's approaching the existing literature, or the way the argument's framed, the way the data is presented. As I said, we get many things that are very well written and very interesting, but the style may be something more appropriate for a different outlet, or more of an essay or historical and biographical work. We get those, but if the argument's not framed, if the data or the research isn't framed in sort of in the journalistic style that we use, in an academic paper type of way, that can be an issue as well. Like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions on the chat or the question and answer. But it can seem like all of your work is done when you've done the research and you've written the paper, but there's quite a detail-oriented process to complete the back and forth with our reviewers and publishers to get things published. I'll conclude there. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks so much, Ned. So some questions are coming in both on Facebook and on the Q&A. So we're going to keep those until later, but I see that Harris has showed up and has unmuted himself. Importantly.
I can, so that we don't have a huge backlog. Should we take some now, Julia, or should we go and do the whole presentation? I suppose that's how you prefer to do it, right? Okay.
Hey, we can go with the flow here. Like anything goes. This is
because I am afraid that there's won't be as interactive. So just very briefly.
Well, let's go ahead then. So Ned, if you could unmute yourself and show your video. And so here's some questions that we've had. There is some questions on the Q&A about decisions about publishing, whether to submit to general journals or to specific journals. There's another question about advice for young scholars, whether or not they should try to hit high impact journals and lower impact journals later. Ned and Harris, some questions that have come in on the Facebook question. There are some questions about how we choose reviewers that I think would be appropriate for now, or we could let Whalley take it up if you'd like. And then a question more specifically about how Nationalities Papers compares with Nations and Nationalism.
Yeah, so very briefly, I don't think I want to cover all of them because Gulnaz and Roland are going to speak in a minute. But I sent a link, I just shared the link of a website that tries to not only show you what's the rank of each journal, and that's not our job today to compare different journals from each other. There are websites that do that and associations that only focus on that. So you can easily find what's the rank of each journal in area studies or political science or in history. And those are public information. What's important though, as some of you are asking more pointedly, as I said, as I alluded to in my first remarks, it's important for you to know what's your audience, not just in terms of like the audience that you want to read your paper or your work, but also basically who is going to be the judge of your work, right? So as I mentioned, in different tenure systems, there are different standards. In different parts of academia, there are different standards. It depends whether you're at a liberal arts college or whether you're at a research university, a research-focused university, let's say. So all of these answers will have to be calibrated to individual cases. in terms of like particularly what happens with nationalities papers, we're trying to turn around manuscripts as quickly as possible. It could vary from anywhere, you know, if it's a desk reject, it could happen within a week, right? So if it's, and I'll let Ned to speak more specifically maybe about this, but it could be all the way to 2-3 months. And it really depends on whether we're gonna go through a second round and whether the reviewers that we had in the first round will be available to review again. So a lot of these issues, and I understand, actually, this is great opportunity for us to, you know, communicate with our potential authors or former authors so that they get a better sense of all this, because often we get queries and questions from authors, and I'm sure Ned is getting as many as I am, that often demonstrate a lack of understanding of how this process works, the peer review process. Obviously, not everybody on this call is at the same level of familiarity with it. So I'm happy to talk more in depth about that. In terms of reviewers, I think I'm gonna leave it to Gulnaz to talk about the role of associate editors, although I'm also one of them as well, and I have been for a long time. And then I think we should ask Roland also to speak a little bit about book reviews before we go back to questions. Ned, do you want to add something?
Sure. Yeah, I'd just like to jump in here a bit. So basically, the length of time it can take to process something and get it published very much depends on what state it came in as. I mean, it also depends on whether or not we can find reviewers quickly for that piece. But when things come in and, you know, the file types aren't correct, the copy editing, it hasn't been well edited, the citations are wrong, not all the required information is provided, we will go back and forth with you to get all of that information and get the piece in a place where it can be published. And our publisher does that as well. So that process it can vary enormously, but the best way to make sure that your paper gets published as quickly as possible is to upfront follow basically all the directions, provide all the information, and make sure that you've submitted a carefully considered, well-edited, well-organized piece. Again, we have things go through multiple rounds of revision with reviewers, depending on how much they need, and again, it can also take some time to find reviewers, particularly for more sort of niche articles. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much, Ned. I am unmuting my video. For showing my video. Just to remind you, please put your questions if you can in the Q&A as opposed to the chat. I am monitoring both, but there's a lot going on in the chat. And then we also have questions on Facebook. So the 3-screen is crossing my eyes just a bit. So some of these questions have been answered. Some of the questions that you have here, we're going to pitch to our other panelists. Our next panelist is Gulnaz Sharafudinova. Gulnaz, if you could please unmute yourself and unmute your video. Thank you so much. Gulnaz is one of our associate editors at Nationalities Papers. She has the largest regional role, or she's subcontracted with the largest regional role because she does Russia for us. She's also a lecturer at King's College London. Gulnaz, you have the virtual floor.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Julie. Yeah, so I've been at this role. I'm actually a reader at King's College London. There are 2 less positions until the lecture, but I've been at this role since January. So my experience is not that long, but I'm going to share with you all the experience that I have been accumulating in this associate editorship position. And so the manuscripts that focus regionally on Russia or post-Soviet states. So I actually cover not just Russia, but manuscripts on Estonia and Lithuania and the Baltics until the Central Asian countries do come to me. Although I think on the Caucasus we have a different person working, but I've received manuscripts on Tajikistan, on Kazakhstan, and on the Baltic states as well. So all post-Soviet states and Russia. And also I should point out that our journal is multidisciplinary. So we get manuscripts that are in international relations and that focus on foreign policy issues. We get manuscripts that are historical in nature, that look into things from World War I and World War II and a sort of larger 20th century. And we get manuscripts that look at current events and processes, and that the very recent one was on things that are on street bureaucracy issues in St. Petersburg. And so it's quite a wide range of topics, and we thematically we invite that wide range. We we are multidisciplinary, and therefore if you have interest and research focus on post-Soviet region, on whether historical or current, please, yes, consider our journal. And I think someone was asking a question on what's the difference between nations and nationalism. To my understanding, nations and nationalism very much focuses on sort of global coverage. There are a lot of articles from, I don't know, Quebec, ethnic issues in Latin America. We have been associated with the Association for the Studies of Nationalities, and a lot of our researchers and a lot of our manuscripts are associated with this region, Europe and Eurasia. Now, we already, Harris and Ned talked about what is necessary to go through the first filter of not being desk rejected. And I would say we're pretty kind on those issues, but yes, minimal standards of academic writing. And what I want to point out on my side is that the main thing that needs to be spelled out directly and upfront without hiding what you're doing is, what is your contribution? Do you see your contribution as empirical in nature, or do you see your contribution as analytical in nature, right? And because many of our authors come from non-English speaking countries, it also was discussed already, but I want to point out that we do, and I see it as I read manuscripts, I see, of course, different styles of writing. And whoever considers publishing in any American, British journals have to really understand that the nature of writing in English is quite different from writing in Russian, from writing in Italian, from writing in German. And if I were to characterize what's the key difference is, I would say it's the directness of writing. It's the ownership over the message and the optimal exposition of the message that you want to make. So very frequently in the manuscripts that we receive, I, for example, have to sometimes read twice to understand what's happening, go through many paragraphs to look what is the contribution of this paper, how does the author consider the main contribution of this work to the literature, right? And this is not what you want to do. What you want to do is you want to have that contribution up front. You want to not bury it to the paragraph number 8 or page number 8. You want to have it on your, if not, first, second paragraph, then on the third, if not on the first page, then on the second page, and definitely in the abstract. So you have to be very direct in your writing, in delivering your message, and in understanding yourself what your contribution is. And we do accept analytical contributions, and we also accept empirical contributions. We value empirical contributions. If you have worked in archives, if you have some original data that you have discovered, and this is your contribution, even if it doesn't have analytical, innovative nature, your empirical contribution is sufficient. And you just have to show, expose, and talk and justify why it is important in the current academic field. Now, I'm shifting from this to the issue, of course, reviewers, right? So the process works so that the manuscripts come into the system, they go to NED, and then they come to me. I guess NED decides which associate editor.
I decide.
Oh, Haris, you decide. Yes. So Haris and Ned work together on that, and so it comes to me, and I have an email saying you need to take an action on this manuscript, and by logging into the system. And of course, the first thing I do is I look for reviewers for this piece. How do I find reviewers? Sometimes I know the field well myself. If it is something on Russian politics, Russian regional politics, on Russian national identity related issues, so I know that field very well. So I think about who would be the most fitting individual for that review. In many other cases, I don't know the specific scholars who write on these issues. Well, what do? I study the field myself. I study, okay, who else is working on, urban environment in Buryatia in Russia, who works on issues of nationalism, national identity in Central Asia, who has studied art form in Central Asia during the Soviet period. So I find these individuals who would be a best fit to review the piece. Sometimes, I have to decide, for example, if there is a piece on international relations, foreign policy related, which tries to make an analytical argument and say it is on constructivism, right? So I have to decide for reviewers who do know constructivism as an international relations theory, but I also need to find someone who does know Russian foreign policy, or perhaps relationships between Russia and China or Japan or the European Union. And in those situations, it might not be just one or two people who do both of these things. I will make sure to find someone who is very knowledgeable about, who can make a statement about the analytical contribution of that piece, but who also, and another person who knows very well Russian foreign policy. Usually so far, I haven't had to make such different decisions. Usually I was able to find experts who actually are constructivists and who are also specialists in Russian foreign policy, but I expect that in the future that might be the case. So reviewer selection is also a tricky process, because sometimes, in many cases, well, we do get, people are not available, and sometimes I have to go over this process of looking for reviewers over and over again. I have to come every, a week or 3-4 days to see if the invitation was accepted, and if it's not, if it was declined, then I have to continue. The worst case scenario I've had, I haven't been lucky with one paper, and I had maybe 6 people who declined an invitation for review, and it wasn't even a very, in fact, it was on a country that is very much in the news, and maybe I could only explain to myself that these individuals have been under a lot of attention and public demand, and so sometimes it is hard, but those are more exceptions. In either situations, waiting for, finding the reviewer and then waiting for the review is a process that requires patience. And I would say that you should start worrying if you haven't gotten a review within up to 3 months, I would say, right? But sometimes we get lucky and our reviews come in very quickly. So I think in one of the statistics I saw that from acceptance to publication, there was just 27 days. And we could have a situation when within 2-3 weeks of your submission, we could have already reviews. So, but those are also exceptions, right? So we have exceptions of a couple of weeks to almost 5-6 months. But the normal review process, I would expect to happen within at least 3 months. And if you haven't received anything within 3 months, then you can start worrying about that. And you can write and ask and address that question, basically write an inquiry, but otherwise you have to be patient. And let me just note another point, right? In the review process, very rare, I think I haven't had any situation when any manuscript that came in just got an accept and you don't have to do anything. In most situations, the norm is that you will get comments and an invitation for some type of revision. It could be minor revision, it could be major revision. And this is the time to put on your, a hat of being a very constructive listener to your reviewers and to the comments, and deliver the best revision you can in response to the comments. The associate editors, the editor frequently will point out also some potentially additional things, or maybe highlight some of the more important things that come in the review. But the rule of the thumb is you have to address all the comments and in your paper, and write a response letter where you identify what you have done and what changes you have made to the manuscript. And you might be getting a very lengthy review with a lot of comments. It doesn't mean that you have to change your manuscript entirely to fit all the comments. Sometimes you might have very justifiable points that will allow you to keep what you have done the way it was on certain issues, right? So when you have a strong justification for challenging the reviewer, that's perfectly understandable, that's perfectly acceptable, right? So, I guess it's important to have a constructive attitude and a desire and willingness and open-mindedness to listen to the reviewer and to the comments. But if there are issues of principle where you disagree on something, and you can disagree, you should disagree on certain things when you think that you know better, you were there, you spoke to people, you saw the archives, and maybe you're debunking some potentially even mainstream things. But as long as you can justify that type of reaction is acceptable as well. Now, of course, it will raise, the editor's eyebrows if the whole review, all comments are entirely, rejected, right? That's why I'm saying that you have to have an open mind, you have to have sort of a constructive attitude, but otherwise deal in a balanced fashion with all the reviews. And what else? I think those are the key points that I wanted to make with regard to the both reviewer selection and what to do with those reviews. And I think maybe just as the last point of suggestion, once you get those reviews back, don't waste your time by putting it off or shoving it in somewhere, your paper. Then your quick reaction to the revisions will be key in determining how quickly the manuscript could be out. That's why I think from the perspective, Harris and Ned and myself, it's very hard to say when, from this, how long it takes from the submission to the publication. It depends on so many different parts of the process, each of which could differ in length from 2 to 3 days to 2 to 3 months. And so what you can do on your part is at least do your part in terms of not delaying the process and responding to the reviews or responding to the editor's comments as soon as possible, making that a priority. Otherwise, we're very open to your publications. Our journal is very much looking for that research where grad student, PhD student, after established scholars have gone to the field, have done their interesting cutting edge empirical work and bring it back and publish at Nationalities Papers. Thank you.
Gulnaz, thank you so much for that. That was so useful and so practical and just kind of hard hitting. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure everyone else does as well. If you could stay on, there are some questions that are showing up in the Q&A that I think you and Harris, and then maybe also Ned, might weigh in on. There are a couple of them, and they're all a little bit connected, but also disconnected. There are some questions, for example, whether or not someone who is submitting their article can ask for a non-preferred reviewer, someone that they would prefer us not to send the the article out to. So that's one. Another one is asking about when it's appropriate to contact an editor, given the kind of stochastic nature of the time frame, and it can go really long or it can go any short. When is it appropriate? Whom might they contact? Not just at NP, because we could say contact Ned or Harris, but in general, what's the best way to approach an editor, even if it's not at NP, about the time frame for an article. There are a couple of questions in there also about whether an undergraduate might submit an article, or maybe someone who's working on their master's thesis, might they publish their master's thesis or a component or a chapter of it, submit it as an article. If you could talk a little bit about pitching it for those who are maybe not affiliated with university, or if they are affiliated, not at the PhD level. If you could speak to that. And then if you could look at the Q&A, there are a couple of questions about the NP purview, whether we accept articles on cultural history as a arena or a topic that we're interested in, or places outside of Eurasia. For example, I think there's a question here on Southwest Asia. So if you could speak to some of those persnickety bits, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Julia. I'm gonna, first of all, I think everybody has access to the Q&A, at least on Zoom. But I'm not gonna assume everybody can see the Zoom, because some people are watching us from Facebook. I've been answering frantically while Gulnaz was giving all this great advice on that. So some of my answers are there, but just to recap, first of all, our acceptance rate is less than 40%, and it's dropping every year. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't submit. You still get good reviews, you improve your work. So our acceptance rate for without any revisions is even we have even fewer articles accepted without revisions. So that would be probably 10% of the articles would not go back, even less probably would not go back for significant or minor revisions. That's a big question that many people have. In terms of affiliation, we don't really care whether you finish your master's. I've already addressed this online. Or whether you finish your dissertation. You can submit a manuscript to us at any point if you think it's ready. Now, whether it's ready or not, and whether you've gotten significant feedback, all these issues are covered by what Gulnaz was saying, and what I said in the beginning. A manuscript, just because you wrote a paper, doesn't mean it's ready to be submitted, right? So it's not linked to whether you have reached your ceremony, your graduation ceremony, or whether you got your degree. I often get people telling me, well, I passed my PhD with distinction, or I got my MA with distinction. How can you possibly reject my piece? Well, the review process is not the same as you getting a degree. It doesn't mean that your work is bad. It may mean it's not a good fit for a particular journal. And again, I'm not talking just about nationalities papers. It could mean that basically your work was not as developed in the eyes of particular reviewers, right? So lack to an extent is a factor. But that doesn't mean you should be discouraged. You can resubmit, you can revise your work and send it to another journal. Thankfully, there are many journals out there. So the point is, many people confuse accreditation or qualifications linked to affiliations and so on and so forth with the quality of the manuscript. And I think Gulnaz's points made that very clear. We're judging the manuscript. We're not judging anything else. In terms of more specific questions about strategies about where to publish in terms of impact factor versus non-impact factor journals and so forth, a lot of these are really a la carte. It has to do with where you're working, what are your professional incentives. We can't give a one-size-fits-all kind of answer. Obviously, a higher impact factor journal is, in terms of like absolute terms, it's better than a lower impact factor journal, but that's relative, again, depending on the field, depending on what people in your field who are gatekeepers or important people who hire people in that field think about particular journals, right? So those are not easy answers for us to give. In terms of content, I think our description is pretty clear on the web. We obviously publish a lot of history, but it has to have either new empirical work, as Gilna said, or a novel theoretical argument. If it's just a synthesis of the literature, we usually wouldn't publish it unless we have solicited this through Roland, who is our book review editor. Gilnas, do you want to add some things on this?
What was the specific question, Haris?
There were many questions. I didn't know if you wanted to add anything, but I think Roland should speak. There is a question I've been keeping from answering because Roland hasn't spoken yet. And that's about whether we have a running list of books that we like to be reviewed and so on and so forth. Let's cover the book reviews and then we can go back to some of the specifics.
Great. So we're going to move on to talk about book reviews. There's also a question in here about special issues and another question about journals that require special topics. And I'm the special issues editor of Nationalities Papers, so I'll sweep up some of those issues after Roland speaks. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Roland Spickerman, 2Ns, who is our book review editor, our fabulous book review editor, and associate professor of history at University of Texas Permian Basin.
Hello, everyone. Yes. We do have a list of books. Let me start with that. We receive books from publishers regarding Eastern Europe, Russia, Central Asia, all the post-Soviet states, Turkey, Middle East, and occasionally we've even received books regarding China and Mongolia. The topics of the books range from politics to culture and history. I think I got a book the other day regarding the Holy Roman Empire, and I'm not quite sure what to do with that one. Happily, my predecessors here have covered a lot of the stuff about what we might be looking for, but what I will reiterate, what we would be looking for in a review is an ability to comment on the scholarship and method of the work being reviewed. We don't want just a summary of the book. Ideally as well, some commentary on how the work fits into the larger context of the topic of the subject. Typically, we're looking for something about 1,000 words, but that's flexible. If you have said what you need to say in less than that, that's fine. If you need a few more words than that, we're pretty good about that too, within limits. A 3,000 word book review might raise an eyebrow or two. Book reviews work a little bit differently than the journals do because the book review editor solicits reviews a little bit more perhaps than editors might solicit articles. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how I do that. Given the range of topics that Nationalities Papers covers, there's no way for a book review editor to be a specialist in everything. So I spent a lot of time using online sources, finding appropriate potential reviewers for any given topic. One thing I might look at, for example, is a look for authors of articles in Nationalities Papers or presenters at ASN conferences, people who have presented papers on themes similar to the book, on the assumption that those would be the people who are most expert and most current on that particular topic. Obviously, I consult with the associate editors at Nationalities Papers as well for the same reason. I cannot be an expert on everything. There's a question about that I saw about unsolicited reviews. Again, our preference is for us to solicit the reviewers ourselves. But unsolicited reviews would be considered, but they are not automatically published. They get reviewed just as articles would be reviewed. We would need also to see something about your affiliation and your specialization, basically some documentation that you would be qualified to write such a review. Right now, we are looking at building a base of potential reviewers to make it a little bit easier to find people. I'm going to write down my address, my email address. One moment. So if you are interested in reviewing, send me an email with your name, your specialization, affiliation, topics of interest. And if you have previous publications, not required, but if you have previous publications, please send those along too. As other people have said, the book reviews are a great way to get started. And we certainly would welcome them. We're setting up a SurveyMonkey shortly also to build an even bigger database of potential reviewers. So when that comes online, I invite you heartily to participate in that SurveyMonkey. Again, my predecessors said a lot of the things that I would need to say as well. So I'm not going to be redundant and just leave it at that.
Thank you, Roland. Can I jump in and anticipate some of the online questions that I just realized we haven't answered? In terms of word limits, again, we don't want to turn this into just a Nationalities Papers necessarily webinar, but we have a pretty long, we have a 12,000 word limit. But other journals have much a lower one. So I know this is a problem specifically for historians, and that's why we increased our word limit to 12,000 words at Nationalities Papers. It used to be 10,000 for a long time, if I remember correctly. We have done this primarily to facilitate historians who have lengthy, as you know, and some historically minded political scientists who have lengthy footnotes and archival material to cite. Other journals have lower word limits. Oftentimes, though, we do get 4,000 or 5,000 word type of articles that are more like literature reviews. That's a reason for desk rejection. Similarly, when I get emails that say, I have an essay of 5,000 words discussing this important topic. If it's just a synthesis of existing work, more often than not, we are not going to review this. There needs to be some theoretical statement that is novel or a contribution to the literature, or new empirical evidence of some sort presented there. So that's to answer some a bundle of questions. Also, we're not the right journal to submit policy questions, policy-related work directly, unless we have invited you to write for an analysis of current events type of publication. We do have some of those, but usually they're articles that are just responding to a specific event that just recently happened. But usually these are solicited. In terms of our original articles, and it's very clear in our journal when you look at our table of contents, which ones are the original articles, we usually don't publish policy-oriented. That doesn't mean you can't have policy implications in that piece, but it can't be just a policy proposal type of article. We usually don't review those unless it's a very hard adjudication, whether it's policy and theory together. So I think that covers quite a bit, but Julie needs to address some of the special issue ones that I haven't touched on. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. There are a couple questions about special issues. We're shifting our focus, or our mechanism of special issues at Nationalities Papers, to include kind of three rough categories. The first category is a topic that we choose. So what we might do is do a call. We would advertise it on our website to say, okay, here's a question that we're interested in. We're entertaining proposals for special issues. Here is a deadline. Here are some topics or thought questions that we have in mind that you might consider, but you could make your own pitch. For that, we would expect a full proposal. That is, there would be a guest editor who would take control and leadership on the proposal. They would select or have together a group of authors of no less than 4, no more than 8 articles. And each of those articles would have, in addition to the author, of course, the abstract and a title. They don't have to be full papers, but they have to be ideas that are roughly kind of honed out enough or polished enough that we can see the contribution. And so what the guest editor would do was make us a pitch. Here is the theme that you've supported or advertised, and this is our proposal for the theme. And so we would set a deadline for that. We would collect them by the deadline, and then we would choose which one of the proposals best fits where we think the slot should go. That's option number one. We're going to do maybe one a year along those lines, maybe even less than that, depending on how some of the other special issues go and what's going on in the world. Like right now, there's a lot of stuff going on, and so we're contemplating this sort of call. A second kind of call is a guest editor call, where we actually don't ask for an entire submission of proposals, but rather maybe ask a guest editor also about a specific theme. We might advertise and say, okay, we want a guest editor to take on a theme, and then that guest editor would design a call for us. And in that sense, we would just ask for papers on that particular theme. And the guest editor would entertain the papers. They would get the papers submitted to them. We would expect not abstracts, but full papers for this. And then the guest editor would choose from the papers that are submitted to kind of put together a special issue that fits their vision. In that sense, then the call would be different. It would again go on our website, but it would be about a particular issue, and we have already designated a guest editor that would be in charge of considering the proposals. What that means is, where the first one is kind of like, well, we have this group that we gave a topic, we were all on a panel together at a conference, here we all go, they're all together. Here, the guest editor might not actually know the authors particularly well. They may not have put these things together in a particular unit, but rather are taking the call just based on the question, based on the call, taking the papers in there in that form. And in that sense, then the papers all come in, they're already written. The third way is for you guys to make us a pitch. And for the pitch to happen, what you do, and again, the language will be on our website, is to come up with your own theme and say, you know, we have this great idea for a theme. Maybe it comes from a conference presentation where a whole group of panelists come up, and then you make the pitch to me. And you send me an email saying, you know, Julie, this is what I think. We have a guest editor. So it would be the guest editor who makes the pitch to me. Here are the abstracts, here are the articles. This is why we think it's a good fit for Nationalities Papers. You would need to have a sense of the journal, what the journal scope is, what we've published recently to talk about fit, and then make a pitch. And then I can make a call on whether or not to accept it for consideration. And once I say, yes, you know, that sounds interesting, why don't we try it? Then the papers need to come in, and then they would all go under peer review. What that means is that for that special issue, even though I green light the concept, the issue itself has not been green lit until we have all the papers in hand and they undergo peer review. And we know that a sufficient number of them can be accepted for the journal. So these are three different ways. Right now inside the journal, we're just accepting the pitches that come in. And so they come in on a rolling basis. We're going to create some more parameters on that and give more guidelines that are going to show up soon, like in the next couple of weeks on the journal website. But that's the general trend. And so what it does is this is a nice way to do it, because depending on how holistic your concept is for your proposal or for the special issue, you can decide, you know, wait, it would be cool to be a guest editor, but I don't really have all the papers in hand. Why don't I pitch a guest editorship, and then the journal can take care of the call for you? Or you can say, you know what, we have this whole thing put together. We think it's brilliant. What do you think? And then submit it. So there's a lot of flexibility in there.
Mylonas, do you want to go first? You have some...
Yes. So there is a question from Tahmina Inayatov about the politics of our journal, and please, Haris, also chime in. But in my understanding, our main, considerations are linked to thematic focus and geographical scope. Politically, we don't have any specific affiliations or any directly stated preferences. We are an academic journal that is looking forward towards empirically rich and analytically innovative studies. So we do not position ourselves as specifically conservative or specifically progressive or on the left or on the right. So political issues are not part of our considerations, as long as academically it is what we would like it to be in terms of thematic scope and geographical scope, and of course academic quality.
Yeah, let me add a few more remarks building on some of the questions. I know it's a very heterogeneous group that is listening, but I know some of you may be ABD or writing, finishing your dissertation, and I got some questions about from people, what part of the dissertation can they publish, and so on and so forth. A lot of it depends. So let's assume you have a dissertation written and you want to publish a chapter. Whether you're going to be able to, obviously you can submit a chapter, rework chapter of your dissertation to us or another journal. Whether that's going to create problems with you publishing the dissertation as a book depends on a variety of things. It depends on what the book editor or the editor of that press that you're interested in contacting allows that, and what percentage of the book can be published, or of the manuscript can be published before you publish the book. So there are all these type of considerations. Some presses say you can publish up to 30-40% of the book before it's published. Others have different views. So that's the answer in terms of how we deal with this type of issues. In terms of special issues, somebody asked, because I made the distinction between original articles and the rest. I wasn't distinguishing special issue original articles from original articles, although they are distinguished by the thematic aspect of it. But our special issue articles are blindly reviewed. They're going through the same peer review process that our other original articles are going. So from that perspective, they're equal and have equal standing. They may be statistically more likely to be accepted exactly because we have already gone through this process of selection of who is going to be submitting a special issue proposal and so on and so forth. But they do get reviewed, and often we do get rejections of articles that are part of a special issue. Okay, so that clarifies another question. In terms of geographical scope, I touched upon this earlier. We do better in reviewing manuscripts from our traditional areas of expertise as an association, because we are the journal of the Association for the Studies of Nationalities. So we have a strength when it comes to post-Soviet space and Eastern Europe and the Balkans. And more recently, we're also covering other parts of the world, but close to that initial area. If we do get a manuscript, however, and we do often get some manuscripts on Spain or on Latin America, if the theoretical work is really close to the interest of the journal and we can find reviewers, we will review it. That doesn't mean that this is what we primarily will publish, but we could and do sometimes get such submissions, and we do review them. Sometimes if we see a topic and a region that we're not strong on, we would just tell the author from the get-go that we're desk rejecting this primarily because we don't want to waste your time. We will probably have a really hard time to find good reviewers. And that's primarily, so it doesn't mean your work is bad when you get such an email. It just means that we might not be able to review it. Julie, do you have other questions I may have missed? I've been trying to answer some of them online.
So there is a question about copy editing. Why don't I just do a final call? So
Ned could cover that. Yeah.
Okay, great. So it's 2:04 and we go until 2:20, and I have a few remarks to talk about our virtual ASN initiative at the end. So we have about 10 more minutes for questions. So if you would like to add some. Ned, if you wouldn't mind coming in and talking a little bit about peer review or copy editing. And then someone else had asked about editorial support, especially for those whose native language is not English. So if you guys could speak a little bit to anything, any advice you have on that score, that would be great.
Sure. Again, for any help with English for non-native speakers, on our instructions for contributors page, which has been posted under the language section, there's a link to a service that can provide help in that regard. Again, many of our articles are from around the world, so it's in we encourage everyone to submit. You should not submit because for that reason. Again, the copy editing is done by our publisher, the Cambridge. They have their own copy editors who do it. Our editorial staff does more sort of the content related, and the reviewers obviously do most of the content related suggestions and editing. There was another question also about style and how difficult it is for authors to change style for every publication they refer to. We don't reject pieces because your references aren't correct or aren't correctly cited in our style. If the piece meets the academic and thematic standards of the journal, then we're very interested in it. So we encourage everybody to submit. But those are things that end up getting addressed later in the process, and we do address them. And then again, just also my email address, it's been up there before, but I'll post it again. Any specific questions on the side of stuff, I'm happy to answer any.
Ned, if I could ask you actually to speak to how the authors know what's going on in the process. So if it gets once the article is sent out for review, for example, Mylonas was saying she had to go for one article, she had to go through 6 different people. Is there an automatic message inside Manuscript Central that lets the authors know? Do they get an email from Manuscript Central saying that their thing has now been under review, or how do they check the status of their article through our process?
So when an article is
well, the checklist that he or she has is met, then they may contact the editor-in-chief. Then the editor-in-chief may solicit the opinion of an associate editor or an editorial board member saying, well, look, this is too short or it's too policy-oriented. Can you give me a second opinion? So that type of process, depending on how people, how responsive people are in each journal, editorial board, and so on and so forth, it could take even up to a month. So it's possible somebody may get a desk rejection in a month, and they may think, well, why did it take them so long? I think it's cathartic to know that this is not someone trying to make your life worse. It sometimes takes a long time because of all these processes that may have to take place before something like that is done. And in fact, sometimes people disagree with each other. It's possible that the associate editor thinks in one way and the editor-in-chief in another, and then they have to call in a third opinion. And so it takes a lot of time. We spend a lot of time doing this work, and we're not perfect. You can criticize us, but we're trying to basically do the best we think is possible for the journal and for cumulative knowledge basically to be produced, because that's our main goal is to publish high quality manuscripts and to bring to light your research.
Great, thank you so much, Harris. I think this ends our Q&A because I think we've answered all the questions that I'm seeing showing up in the Q&A. So I'd like to take this opportunity to ask all of our panelists to show their faces, show their videos, so we can thank them very much for their presentations. Thank you guys so much for everything. This has been absolutely wonderful, and it looks like from our Q&A that we've been at least moderately useful. At least people claim that we've been helpful. So thank you so much for taking the time. What I'd like to do, people are talking on the chat about future ASN events. What ASN has decided to do is to take virtual ASN into something that we do as part of our regular programming with or without the convention, something that we can offer all year round. And so we're looking to establish it in a much more firmer, institutionalized way starting in the fall. What this will mean so far, everything has been done outside of our membership paywall. That is that we've been offering this programming for members and non-members. Anyone who's associated or interested in the organization has been able to come in and take advantage of our Zoom webinars and our public-facing Facebook page and our YouTube page. What we're going to do in the future is we're going to bifurcate some of this programming. Some of it will go online for the full viewing public, but some of the other programming programming workshops, much more hands-on sort of things, we're going to design for our members, and that's going to be behind our membership paywall. So what I'd like to do at this, take this opportunity and put on my hat, not as special issues editor of Nationalities Papers, but as treasurer of the Association for the Study of Nationalities, is to encourage you to become a member. If you become a member, our membership rates are priced to be competitive, very competitive, and to be relatively inexpensive. The journal comes with the membership rates, so you get the journal as a bonus as part of your membership. And then soon, once we have the virtual programming up, you'll be able to access the website and all of the members only advantages that we're going to have behind the scenes. And more and more more and more announcements on that are going to be made. Zsuzsa Chergo, our former president of ASN, is going to be the chairperson of virtual ASN for the coming year. And she has a lot of ideas and a lot of things in store. Another thing she's asked me to announce, in addition to that, is that we will be having another virtual ASN event. It's not yet determined when it's going to be, but I think it's going to be before September on nationalism and racial hierarchies. Peter Rutland is going to be spearheading that. He's writing a state of the field article on that issue for Nationalities Papers, and it's also going to be a topic for special issues coming forward. It's obviously very topical given our current political discussions of the day of racial hierarchies and how they interact with nations. Inclusiveness, exclusiveness, and identity politics, of course, is entirely within our milieu. So look for advertisements on that. Look for more advertisements on future programming, and take the opportunity to renew or establish your membership to ASN. It's a worthy organization, and we're doing a lot of work to make the value of our membership increasingly more relevant for your needs. So thank you all very much for
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, everyone.
All right. With that, then I'm gonna shut us down. Thank you all so much, and please do. We're looking forward to all of your submissions into the journal. Speaking as one of the associate editors, and I know Gulnaz agrees with me, we want our workload to be high so that we can get your things under review and get them out in the press. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ned, so much. Thank you, Roland, so much, and Harris.